A crimson glow lit the evening sky over Riverside City. In the bustling streets below, passers-by hurried along, oblivious to the unfolding drama destined to intertwine two vastly different lives. This day, calm yet humming with possibility, would mark the beginning of a story neither Alex Liu nor Anne Sue could have ever predicted. The Liu family was no ordinary household. Renowned for their wealth and business empire, they dominated Riverside's economy through the Liu Group. But on an unassuming morning, everything changed. The media reported a horrifying car accident involving the company's president, Alex Liu. Rumors circulated that he had been so severely injured that he'd never be able to have children. At the Liu mansion, all eyes were on Alex's mother, a poised yet anxious woman who refused to believe the tabloids' sensational headlines. Still, fear lingered in her heart. If Alex truly couldn't father a child, who would continue the Liu legacy? Mrs. Liu, sighing over a newspaper.
These gossip columns are going too far, spreading rumors that our family line will end, that I'm even keeping a boy toy on the side. I'm sick of it. Alex, you're already 29. If you don't find someone soon, people are going to keep making up these ridiculous stories.
Alex, wearily.
Mother, if there's nothing else, I'm heading to the office.
Mrs. Liu calling out.
Wait, Alex, listen to me first.
Yet Alex was already on his way out. He had little patience for scandalous headlines and meddlesome concerns about marriage. He ignored her pleas and strode outside, determined to distract himself with work. Sensing Mrs. Liu's distress, the young family friend, Eric Xiao, stepped forward. Eric, to Mrs. Liu in a confidential tone.
Auntie, let me handle this. I'll arrange something tonight to help Alex get over his reservations.
Mrs. Liu with a worried nod.
Just please, Eric, do what you can. The gossip is exhausting.
So began Eric's plan. If Alex refused to find a partner willingly, Eric would engineer a moment of fateful encounter. Meanwhile, across the city, at a karaoke bar known for its questionable patrons, a young college student named Anne Sue was rushing around with water bottles and cleaning cloths, doing her best not to attract unwanted attention. Little did she know her entire life was about to change. Anne was no stranger to hardship. Her parents, especially her mother, saw her as little more than a tool, someone to send out delivering water and working part-time, all for the family's profit. One mistake on the job today had cost her what little she'd earned. Terrified of her mother's fury, she tried to beg the club's manager for mercy, but the manager only turned a cold shoulder. That night, she found herself cornered in a dark hallway by a group of thugs angry that she'd spilled their drinks. One of them grabbed her harshly by the arm. Thug, sneering.
You made a mess of our table, girl. Think you can just run off?
Anne, terrified, struggling to break free.
Let go of me!
She bit one of them out of sheer panic, only to enrage them further. Just when she feared the worst, the group suddenly stepped back. A tall man in an immaculate suit and a distinct dragon ring gleaming on his finger had appeared. Alex, coolly.
Get lost.
His command was short yet decisive. Something about his gaze sent shivers down the thugs' spines. They slunk away, grumbling curses under their breath. Heart pounding, Anne turned to thank her rescuer. Anne, eyes wide, out of breath.
Thank you, sir, for saving me.
Alex, curtly.
You're lucky I showed up.
By fate, this was Alex Liu, out that night only because Eric had insisted on helping him find a companion. The moment he laid eyes on Anne's frightened face, his usually guarded heart felt a twinge of concern. They traded only a few words when Anne fainted from exhaustion and fear. Eric, rushing to Alex.
Alex, you actually touched her. That's a good sign. Let's get her to a safe place.
Quickly, they brought Anne to a hotel suite Eric had prearranged. Though Alex insisted he wanted none of it, events had a momentum of their own. Anne, still groggy, found herself alone in a plush hotel room with an older, handsome stranger. Her mind swirled with confusion. A dizzy heat spread through her body. It seemed the thugs had slipped something into her drink at the karaoke bar. Anne, voice shaking, barely conscious.
Mister, I feel so hot. Help me.
Despite telling himself this was a terrible idea, Alex found her half-delirious request stirring a strange protectiveness within him. She was vulnerable and clearly drugged. One thing led to another, and in that haze, a single night forever fused their fates. Hours later, Anne woke up in bed, disoriented and horrified to realize she'd slept with a total stranger. Her clothes were askew, and the tall man from last night stood by the window, quietly on the phone. Mortified, she snuck out. She had no idea who this man was. In her eyes, he was just an older man with an imposing aura. Little did she know, she had caught Alex Liu's attention in a way no one ever had. Days turned into a month. Anne tried to push the night's events out of her head. She returned to her everyday grind, delivering water, fending off her mother's demands, and struggling through medical school. But soon her body grew sluggish, her appetite changed, and an uneasy suspicion formed. Upon visiting a clinic, her worst fears were confirmed. She was pregnant, and not just with one child, but twins. Panic consumed her. She was only a student, with no stable job or financial support. How could she possibly raise 2 children? Desperate, she decided to seek out the man responsible, even if it meant humiliating herself, to ask for enough money for an abortion. But she had only a faint memory of his face and no name. By an extraordinary stroke of luck, after searching high and low, she recognized his ring, her slender clue, and traced it to the Liu Group. When she arrived at the company's towering building, security guards shoved her away before she could even get close. Word reached Alex's office that a young woman demanded to speak with him, claiming it was urgent, but Alex turned her away, uncertain it was the same person from the bar that fateful night. Anne left with nothing, crestfallen. In the pouring rain outside the Liu Group, she stood for hours, soaking wet, hoping for a miracle. Alex, glancing out his high-floor window and spotting her in the rain,
Give her an umbrella. I don't want anyone accusing us of making her ill.
he might have pretended to be indifferent, but the next moment he was striding downstairs himself, umbrella in hand. Yet, when he saw her drenched state, a surge of disappointment and anger at her sudden appearance simmered beneath his calm exterior. Alex, coldly,
Why are you here begging for money, trying to sell your story or something else?
Anne, voice trembling, clutching her stomach.
It's not like that.
In her shock and heartbreak, she couldn't bring herself to explain the pregnancy right then. His harsh accusations stung, and her exhaustion overwhelmed her. She retreated into the dark streets, the memory of his unreadable gaze haunting her. That same night, Anne's mother flew into a rage the moment Anne returned home without money. In a fit of frustration, her mother beat her, hurling insults and announcing the unthinkable. If Anne couldn't bring in cash from delivering water or singing at the KTV, she would have to serve wealthier clientele at her uncle's dance hall. Anne's father merely looked on, offering no support. Overcome by hopelessness, Anne decided she had no choice but to end the pregnancy. She would never subject innocent children to such a painful world. Despite her desperation, she couldn't afford the abortion. So, once again, she forced herself to face the looming doors of the Liu Group. This time, Alex was prepared. Unbeknownst to her, he had recognized who she might be, but he refused to meet with her, sending her away a second time. Still, she lingered on the steps, beneath the swirling clouds. A heavy thunderstorm broke overhead, drenching her in seconds. Alex, exiting the building at last, anger brimming.
Are you that intent on money? Did you show up here just so I'd pay you off for a one-night stand?
Anne, voice shaking, tears mixing with the rain.
It's not like that.
She couldn't finish. Grief and disbelief clogged her words. She fled into the storm, certain she had nowhere to turn. At home, worse awaited her. Her mother found out she was pregnant, slapping, cursing, ranting that Anne would shame the family. In a fury, the woman dragged her by the arm toward a seedy clinic. Anne kicked and screamed, but her strength was no match. The doctor's instruments glinted ominously under sterile fluorescent lights. They were about to proceed with the abortion against Anne's will. Anne, tears streaming.
Mom, please. I don't want this.
But the procedure began anyway. Fear paralyzed her. She squeezed her eyes shut, resigned to losing her unborn twins. If you were in Anne's shoes at this exact moment, what would you do? Let me know in the comments below. At that heart-pounding instant, there was a sudden commotion. Doors crashed open. Alex Liu strode in like a wrathful tempest, flanked by his aide Eric. Nurses scattered, doctor halting the procedure in fear of the intruder's commanding presence. Alex, voice low and dangerous.
Let go of her now.
His glare alone was enough to send the doctor stumbling back from the operating table. Heart hammering, Anne recognized her would-be savior as the same man she had loathed moments earlier. Despite his confusing anger and indifference before, he had come. He had come to rescue her and, more importantly, the babies she carried. Anne, choking out a sob.
You're here.
Her mother, outraged, tried to stand in Alex's way. Mother, shouting.
You have no right. This is our family matter.
But Alex's next words revealed everything. Alex, resolute.
They're my children.
Dead silence filled the tiny clinic. Shock descended on everyone, including the mother, who stood slack-jawed at this revelation. Anne, trembling on the operating table, locked eyes with Alex, unsure if this was just another cruel twist of fate or the hope she had nearly lost. He lifted Anne in his arms as though she weighed nothing. Outside, the rain thundered down, drenching the pavement, yet in that moment, none of that mattered. Alex led her gently out of the dingy clinic, and Eric hurried to clear the way, occasionally glaring at Anne's mother with open contempt. In the following hours, Anne found herself lying in a luxurious bedroom, soft bedding beneath her aching body, the faint scent of lavender in the air. She was in the Liu family's grand estate. A warm tray of food and soothing teas sat on a nightstand, placed there by Mrs. Liu herself. Anne could scarcely believe the contrast. One moment, she was pinned to a cold operating table, about to lose her unborn children. The next, she was in the home of the wealthiest family in Riverside. Mrs. Liu, fretting gently.
Poor child. Rest now. You're safe here.
Anne, voice trembling.
Thank you. Thank you for saving me.
Though Anne's mind swirled with fear and gratitude, a deeper realization settled in. She and Alex Liu were bound now, irrevocably, through the life growing inside her. She knew nothing about him beyond his name, his wealth, and the single night they shared. It seemed impossible that someone like him, the powerful CEO rumored to be impotent, would want to take responsibility for a common college girl he barely knew. Yet here she was, and Alex indeed stood outside her door, instructing doctors and nurses to provide her the best care. Each minute with him only deepened the confusion in her heart. She struggled to understand his unpredictable moods. His gaze was protective one moment, ice cold the next. His words could be gentle, but behind them, she sensed secrets and burdens he refused to share. Anne, softly to herself in bed.
I'll do my best to raise these twins. With or without him, I won't let them suffer as I did.
She vowed to herself that she would not be just another pawn in a wealthy household's game, even if her mother had cast her aside for money, even if her father never cared. She wanted her children to know love. Little did she suspect how fiercely the Liu family would come to guard her, and how her destiny as a student, a soon-to-be mother, and the potential future wife of a billionaire would collide into a singular path. For Alex, this was only the start of a deeper conflict. The newspapers, the corporate board, and society's watchful eyes would soon descend upon his every move. Rumors about his condition still swirled. If he suddenly announced he had fathered twins with a nobody, tongues would wag more viciously than ever. But he was a man who met adversity head-on. Despite the cost or scandal, he had decided he would protect Anne from the cruelty of her own family and the scornful gaze of the public. So, in the gilded corridors of the Liu mansion, an unspoken promise took shape. Even if they were separated by class, status, and the wounds of the past, Alex and Anne stood at the threshold of a new future. She never dreamed she would be the mother of his children. He never thought he could truly touch another person's soul again. But fate had woven them together, for better or worse. The sun rose over Riverside City, illuminating the wide avenues and skyscrapers with a deceptive calm. Inside the opulent halls of the Liu estate, however, turmoil brewed in silence. After rescuing Anne from the forced abortion attempt by her family, Alex had installed her in a spacious guest suite just down the corridor from his own room, determined to protect her and their unborn twins. Yet neither of them realized that greater challenges, and even darker conspiracy, were brewing just beyond the high walls of the Liu mansion. In the early hours of the morning, a hush settled over the courtyard. Security guards paced their routes, half watching the sunrise, half watching for any unexpected visitors. Suddenly, a dark sedan pulled up outside the mansion's gates. A woman with a tense expression stepped out, smoothing a sleek pencil skirt. It was Vivian Shen, the daughter of another prominent Riverside family. Though she wore designer heels, her steps were stiff with anxiety. Once inside, she made her way to the reception hall, where a butler informed her that the Liu family was not receiving visitors so early. Butler, bowing politely,
Miss Shen, the family is at breakfast. Perhaps you should call ahead next time.
Vivian refused to budge. She flashed a thin smile and rattled off a tale of urgent corporate collaboration. The butler, uncertain how to proceed, reluctantly guided her to a smaller sitting room. From there, she would wait and hope someone in the family, particularly Alex, would grant her an audience. Yet her mind was elsewhere, turning over the rumor that threatened her ambitions. Anne Sue, a mere college student from a humble background, was pregnant with Alex Liu's child. That news had pierced Vivian's pride like a dagger. Even more enraging was that Alex seemed devoted to protecting Anne. Vivian thought of herself as a perfect match for the Liu heir, well-educated, sophisticated, and from a similarly elite circle. Why would Alex choose a nobody over her? She clenched her fists, recalling how Alex had once brushed her off without a second glance, even after she boldly claimed she had saved him during his car accident. Whether or not that was true, she'd used it to get close, only to be dismissed. Now, with every second that Alex treated Anne as a precious treasure, Vivian felt her resentment flaring. She was about to take drastic measures. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of town, Anne's mother and father were stirring up a new round of trouble. After failing to keep Anne from fleeing to the Liu mansion and losing the chance to profit from forcing her into a marriage with an older man, they had begun plotting an even bigger scheme. Their home was in disarray. Half-packed suitcases cluttered the living room, cheap furniture scuffed from repeated arguments. This time, they aimed to leverage the local media and online gossip to shame the Liu family into paying for their silence. Mother, biting her nails as she paced,
Listen, if we post a video online complaining how Anne refuses to support her poor parents, how she's gone off to live in luxury while we starve, it'll make the Liu family's reputation tank. They'll have to cough up some hush money.
father, nodding excitedly.
That's right. Anne's mother is in poor health. Her father has no job, plenty of angles to pull heartstrings. We'll film a plea for help, show we're desperate. People will sympathize with us.
Truth was, neither parent was starving nor desperate. They still had enough savings from earlier blackmail attempts, and the father occasionally gambled. But a bigger payout from the Lius was too tempting to pass up. Their only obstacle, they needed to ensure that the story gained traction. That was where the local tabloids came in. A quick call, and all the unscrupulous reporters would be on their doorstep. Their motives, once again, had nothing to do with wanting Anne safe or happy. They wanted money, pure and simple. Within the tranquil sanctum of the Liu mansion, Anne finished her morning routine, gentle stretches recommended by the doctor to keep her body healthy in pregnancy. A wave of gratitude washed over her. For once, she didn't have to worry about a harsh mother or mounting debts. A kind housekeeper left nutritious meals outside her door each day. She couldn't believe that this was her life now. Still, her concerns lingered. She had no illusions about this world of wealth. She was a medical student, practical, cautious, and while her heart fluttered at Alex's protectiveness, she couldn't forget that deep down they were nearly strangers, bound more by circumstance than by choice. As she was lost in thought, a gentle knock sounded. Alex, from the hallway.
Anne, are you awake?
She opened the door to find him standing there, tall, composed, his usually stern gaze softer than usual. Anne, managing a warm smile.
Good morning, Mr. Liu. Alex.
Alex, stepping in quietly.
How are you feeling? Any dizziness or morning sickness today?
She shook her head, a faint flush on her cheeks. Though shy around him, she appreciated his careful attention. He carried with him a small bouquet of daisies, setting them down on the bedside table.
These help purify the air and calm the nerves. The housekeeper said you like flowers.
Anne felt a pang in her chest. No one in her family had ever taken note of what she liked. In a moment of vulnerability, she touched Alex's wrist. Anne, softly.
Thank you for everything.
Neither spoke another word. They simply let the silence confirm the growing bond between them. That same morning, Mrs. Liu finally emerged to greet Vivian Shen in the estate's sitting room. Mrs. Liu was polite but cool. Mrs. Liu, taking a seat, arms folded.
Miss Shen, to what do we owe this early visit?
Vivian put on her best gracious smile. Vivian, sweetly.
Auntie Liu, I came to discuss a potential collaboration between my father's company and the Liu Group. We recently acquired some new import channels.
She began outlining business terms that had little to do with why she was truly there. Mrs. Liu listened with mild interest until Vivian shifted gears. Vivian, voice dropping, feigning concern.
Auntie, I also wanted to apologize. I've heard some gossip about your family, specifically about Alex and some young woman. I'm worried about the family's reputation.
Mrs. Liu's eyes flashed momentarily with irritation. She suspected Vivian was fishing for details about Anne. Indeed, the older woman still felt some unease. A random college student was bearing her grandchildren, and reporters circulated endless rumors about Alex's personal life. Yet Mrs. Liu had also witnessed the genuine warmth between Alex and Anne. She had decided to stand by her son's choice. Mrs. Liu, firmly.
Miss Shen, Alex's personal affairs are not open for outside discussion. If that's all, I suggest you speak with the CFO about your proposal.
Startled by the abrupt dismissal, Vivian forced a smile and excused herself, though her eyes burned with frustration. She caught a glimpse of Anne's silhouette drifting across the far end of the corridor and felt a fresh wave of resentment. So the rumors are true, she thought. That girl is here, living as though she's already the lady of the house. Late that afternoon, Eric Xiao arrived at the Liu mansion in a hurry. He looked uneasy, carrying a tablet with headlines swirling about a heartless daughter who refused to save her dying brother, referencing none other than Anne Sue. It was the very smear campaign her parents had threatened. Eric, finding Alex in his study.
Alex, it's all over the local news. Anne's parents are claiming she's abandoned them. They accuse you of coercing her so you can get an heir. They even posted a video of themselves crying and begging outside a shabby home.
Alex scrolled through the vile comments online. He clenched his fists, anger rising at the lies. He refused to let Anne be slandered like this. Just then, a maid rushed in, announcing that Anne's parents, along with a small mob, had gathered outside the mansion. Alex, tossing aside the tablet.
Enough. Let's go.
At the front gates, a handful of unscrupulous reporters milled about, cameras rolling, snapping photos of the imposing estate. Anne's parents led the rabble, pointing furiously at the gate as they harassed the guards. Mother, raising her voice for the cameras.
Anne, my child, please come out. Your father is dying. Have you no heart?
Father, sniffling though no tears came.
It's this rich man who keeps her locked away. We just want to see our daughter. Is that so wrong?
The guard tried to restrain them, but the father shoved him off. A passing reporter captured the moment in a flurry of camera clicks. That was when Alex and Eric appeared. Their presence hushed the crowd. Alex's tall, commanding figure cut an imposing silhouette in the light of the late afternoon. Alex, voice icy.
Tell me what you want.
Mother, launching into a theatrical sob.
Our daughter won't even come out to see us. We just want to say goodbye before her father passes on.
You and I both know that's a lie.
At this, the father started hurling accusations about how Anne's behavior ruined their family's reputation. The mother wailed louder, insisting they had no money for medical treatment. The cameras rolled, capturing every second, and the online audience watching live-streamed footage began to spout hateful messages about Anne, calling her unfilial. A glimmer of relief flickered in the mother's eyes when she saw the cameras. This is good, she thought. He'll have to pay just to make us shut up. But Alex's patience had worn thin. He signaled to security, who efficiently began dispersing the crowd. Suddenly, Anne, trembling and pale, stepped forward from behind the guards. She had been watching from a window and could no longer remain hidden. Her heart hammered in her chest. Anne, voice shaking.
Mom, Dad, why are you doing this? I begged you to let me live in peace.
The father, adopting a tearful expression, pointed an accusatory finger at her.
We're your parents. Don't we deserve your support? You're living in a mansion while we starve.
Anne, raising her voice, tears threatening.
You never starved a day in your life. Every time I tried to help, you demanded more. You tried to sell me to a stranger for 500,000 yuan. Now you lie about Dad's illness.
Gasps rippled through onlookers. Even the reporters paused, uncertain how to proceed. The mother, furious at being exposed, lunged at Anne. Immediately, Alex stepped in, strong arms blocking the woman's attack. The mother stumbled backward. Alex, sternly.
That's enough. You will not touch her again.
Anne's father realized the game was up. The cameras had caught a near assault on a pregnant woman. Panicked, he turned and hurried to shield his wife from any legal repercussions, shouting for the mob to leave. In minutes, the front of the Liu mansion was cleared, reporters scattering, unsure whether they had enough footage to spin the story or if they had inadvertently filmed a crime. That night, a stark silence fell over the mansion. Anne retreated to her suite, shaken by the confrontation. Sitting at the window, she watched the moonlit garden shimmer beyond the glass. Memories of her parents' manipulations looped through her mind. How could they stoop so low? She rested a hand on her abdomen, overwhelmed by the responsibility of 2 new lives soon to arrive. A light tap sounded on the door. She turned to see Alex lingering in the doorway. Alex, quietly.
Mind if I come in?
She nodded. He approached carefully, noticing her damp eyelashes and trembling shoulders.
Anne, I'm sorry you had to face them like that.
Her tears spilled over, and before she knew it, she was crying into his chest. Warmth spread through her as he wrapped her in a gentle embrace. For a brief moment, she felt safe. Anne, voice muffled against his shirt.
I wish I could erase everything they said. I don't want these babies to grow up with lies and hatred.
Alex, speaking into her hair.
They won't. I promise they'll have a better life than you or I ever did.
She looked up, meeting his eyes. In them, she saw sincerity and perhaps a glimmer of affection. It was in this moment, pressed together by tragedy, that Anne realized how much she had begun to rely on him and how her heart fluttered whenever he was near. The next few days passed in relative peace, on the surface at least. Anne's parents retreated for the time being, probably licking their wounds or waiting for another chance to extort money. Meanwhile, Alex's corporate dealings carried on. He began discreetly taking Anne with him to certain safe business functions, introducing her to a life of polished conversations and subtle power plays. Yet tension simmered under the veneer of normalcy. On a particularly clear afternoon, after a visit to her obstetrician, Anne returned to the Liu mansion alone. Alex had an urgent business meeting. In the courtyard, a slender figure stepped out from behind a marble pillar. It was Vivian Shen, her face pale, but with a defiant set to her jaw. Vivian, smiling thinly.
Anne, I've been waiting for you. You don't mind if we have a word, do you?
Anne hesitated, recalling the half-whispered rumors about Vivian's obsessive quest to marry Alex. But curiosity got the best of her. Anne, raising her chin.
Say whatever you need to say.
Vivian pretended concern.
I was only worried about you. I know your parents caused a terrible scene outside the mansion. It must be so stressful. Stress isn't good for the babies, you know.
Though the words were coded in sympathy, the mocking edge in her tone set Anne on guard. Anne, voice icy.
They're my parents, and I'll handle it. It has nothing to do with you.
Vivian, eyeing Anne's pregnant belly.
Doesn't it? People say you trapped Alex with this pregnancy. Now that you've got your hooks in him, you plan to tie down the entire Lou fortune.
The suggestion stung. Anne clenched her jaw, refusing to show weakness.
I don't need to justify myself to you.
Vivian locked eyes with her, frustration twisting her features. For a split second, a malicious glint flashed there, something that hinted she might go further than just words. But the presence of several watchful servants made it impossible for her to act. With a short laugh that betrayed her anger, Vivian strode away, leaving Anne unsettled and wary. That evening, Alex returned from his meeting. He glanced around the grand foyer, heart skipping when he didn't see Anne immediately. Finally, he found her resting in the garden, breathing in the night air. Alex, kneeling beside her.
You look worried. Something happened?
She told him about Vivian's intrusion. Tension flickered across his face. He'd known Vivian all too well, her tenacity, her sense of entitlement, yet he never believed she would dare harm Anne outright. Even so, an unspoken alarm began to ring in his mind. Alex, gently.
It's all right. I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again.
Anne nodded, but a lump of concern still weighed in her chest. Alex placed a light hand over hers. Alex.
I'd like you to meet my legal team tomorrow. We'll draft a set of papers ensuring the twins are officially recognized as my children, with or without a wedding ceremony. It's not the most romantic thing, but...
She met his gaze, her own eyes shining. Anne, quietly interrupting.
You really mean it?
They had never explicitly stated that Alex would claim the children. But hearing it now, as a firm commitment, a public, legal step, stirred a surge of gratitude. For so long she had believed she would be alone. Alex, smiling softly.
You and the babies are under my protection, Anne. In every sense.
Despite the swirl of conspiracies and malicious forces around them, in that moonlit garden, they found a moment of sanctuary. Neither realized how quickly that moment would shatter. Early the next morning, a minor crisis at the Lou Group's supply chain division demanded Alex's attention. Urgent phone calls flew in from a major partner threatening to pull out of a multi-billion-yuan deal if certain shipments didn't arrive on time. Alex had to leave the mansion earlier than usual, instructing the security team to keep a close watch over Anne. Eric, suspicious of the prior day's tension, planned to remain with her as extra precaution. But fate had a different plan. Around midday, a small group of men in plain black suits appeared near the side entrance to the Lou grounds. They brandished official-looking IDs, claiming they had been hired by the family to install new cameras. The unsuspecting guards let them in. By the time Eric realized these men weren't who they claimed to be, they had fanned out through the property. Eric, speaking urgently into his phone,
Alex, something's off. We have unauthorized people in the estate. I'm searching for Anne.
A muffled scuffle cut off his sentence. Moments later, in a secluded corridor, an accomplice cornered Anne. She felt a cloth pressed over her mouth, an unpleasant chemical scent overwhelming her senses. Darkness swallowed her consciousness. When Eric finally found the corridor, it was empty but for an abandoned shawl Anne had been wearing. Panic seized him. He barked orders to security, but they had no clue which direction the intruders had taken. Within minutes, a black van pulled away from the side gate. By the time the estate's alarms blared, the vehicle was gone, along with Anne. Alex arrived home soon after, black rage clouding his features. The second he stepped out of his car, he demanded answers. Security tapes, logs, all of it. Eric, disheveled and guilt-ridden, explained how the intruders had tricked the guards. Eric, breathless with regret.
I should have stayed right beside her. They knew exactly when to strike, when you'd be at the office and I was out of sight.
Alex's knuckles went white. A single name leapt to mind, Vivian. Yet he had no proof. Could it be a rival business interest, or perhaps Anne's own parents, trying a last desperate angle for extortion? He refused to lose control. Instead, he ordered a total lockdown. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Private investigators launched a citywide search. If necessary, Alex would tear Riverside apart brick by brick until Anne was found. But as hours bled into the night without any leads, a terrifying question loomed. What if this abduction was more than a mere ploy for ransom? At a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Anne drifted in and out of consciousness. The faint odor of rusted metal and damp concrete choked the air. She was bound to a chair, her wrists aching. Muffled voices reached her ears, men cursing about the woman with the unborn twins, accompanied by a single, higher voice that hissed orders. For a split second, she thought she recognized the malicious tone. Vivian? Time blurred. Fear gnawed at her thoughts, especially for the babies. She forced herself to breathe steadily to keep calm, remembering Alex's reassuring promise. She had to believe he would find her, and as if the silent universe heard her plea, the door to the warehouse suddenly banged open. A shift of footsteps, shouting. Then a thunderous, familiar voice. Alex, roaring over the chaos.
Anne, where are you?
She tried to scream, but her throat was parched. Then she spotted him in the dim light, a silhouette storming through the half-broken door, flanked by Eric and armed security. Two hired thugs rushed forward to block him, but Alex fought past them, single-minded in his search. At last he spotted Anne, untying her with trembling hands, eyes brimming with relief and anger. Before she blacked out, she felt his arms scooping her up. Whatever had happened, she was safe. And so ended the day that tore apart every facade of peace. Once again, Alex had arrived just in time, but the cost was mounting. Soon, consequences for everyone involved would come crashing down, forcing them to reveal secrets far deeper than the mere question of money or property. A hush settled over Riverside in the aftermath of Anne's rescue. Though she had been found, bruised, and shaken in that deserted warehouse, the questions behind her kidnapping still lingered like shadows. Alex Liu's entire security team was on high alert, determined that no harm should ever befall Anne or the unborn twins again. Despite that outward calm, the undercurrent of tension was stronger than ever. Betrayals and hidden truths were about to collide, tearing down all pretenses once and for all. Late into the night, Alex brought Anne back to the Liu mansion. The drive was silent. She rested in the back seat, occasionally cradling her belly, still in shock from her ordeal. Upon arrival, Mrs. Liu hurried out, eyes swollen with worry. Eric, disheveled from the rescue mission, helped Alex usher Anne inside. Mrs. Liu, voice trembling.
Child, are you all right? My goodness, you look so pale. Did they hurt you? The babies, are they safe?
Anne, managing a shaky smile.
I'm all right now, Auntie. Just a little shaken. As for the babies, the doctor said they're fine.
Hearing this, Mrs. Liu pressed Anne's hands in relief. She summoned the family physician to check Anne once more, while Alex stayed close, refusing to leave her side. By the time the doctor had finished his examination, exhaustion overcame Anne. She drifted into a restless sleep. Alex, though equally drained, couldn't find any peace of mind. He slipped out of her room and into his study, where Eric awaited him with a stern expression. Eric, watching Alex pace.
Alex, I've looked into everyone who could be behind the kidnapping. It's as we suspected. Vivian Shen orchestrated it with some hired thugs.
Alex closed his eyes, rage surging. He remembered how Vivian had insisted she was the true savior from his car accident, a story he hadn't believed for a second. He suspected from the start that she was trouble, but never imagined she would sink this low. Eric, hesitating.
There's more. Our men found evidence that Vivian faked details related to your accident. Apparently, she's also known about Anne's true identity as the Shen family's real daughter for a while. It seems Vivian feared losing her position once the Shen parents learned the truth.
Alex, softly, rage tightening his voice.
Then she thought eliminating Anne would protect her status. So that's how far she was willing to go.
They spoke in hushed tones for another hour, discussing next steps, how best to protect Anne and whether to involve the law. By the time Alex finally stepped out of his study, dawn lightened the horizon. He found himself wandering to Anne's door. Ever so quietly, he pushed it open. She was asleep, blankets rising and falling with her gentle breaths, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. Watching her, Alex made a silent vow no one would ever harm her again. That morning, in a different part of Riverside, Mr. and Mrs. Shen were holed up in an office suite, grappling with the bombshell they'd recently uncovered. The daughter they'd lost at birth was not the adoptive child they had raised Vivian, but rather Anne Sue. Vivian had known this all along. She had gone to great lengths to suppress any chance of Anne meeting her true parents. Mrs. Shen, eyes brimming with tears.
It's unimaginable, my Anne, subjected to all this, and we unknowingly doted on someone who wasn't ours, while our real daughter grew up under those awful parents.
Mr. Shen, voice resolute.
No more regrets. We found out the truth, and now we must make it right. If Vivian truly harmed Anne, then we have no choice. We must bring justice for our biological daughter.
Mrs. Shen nodded, face set with grim determination. It was time to confront Vivian and, if necessary, to cut all ties. They had poured resources and love into her for over 20 years, but they would not allow her to destroy Anne's life. Just when the Shen couple made plans to approach the Liu mansion, fate twisted yet again. Word got out that Vivian was on the run, having realized the noose was tightening around her. Some said she had fled to a private villa outside the city. Still others claimed she might turn herself in. The tension, both familial and legal, had reached a breaking point. Meanwhile, Alex discreetly arranged a meeting at a high-end restaurant in the heart of Riverside, inviting Mr. and Mrs. Shen to finally meet Anne. He knew how sensitive the situation was. Anne had been through too much trauma already, and discovering her true parents might be overwhelming. Yet the moment for truth could no longer be delayed. Mr. Shen, bowing politely when Alex greets them at the restaurant.
Thank you for agreeing to meet, Mr. Liu. We appreciate your efforts in protecting our daughter.
Alex, leading them to a private dining suite.
I just hope Anne can find closure from all this. She has lived a very difficult life.
Inside, Anne sat quietly, hands clasped in her lap. She looked up nervously as her supposed birth parents entered. They, in turn, froze at the sight of the young woman who so closely resembled pictures of Mrs. Shen from decades ago. Mrs. Shen, voice shaky, tears forming.
Anne, my child.
A swirl of emotions crossed Anne's face. Hope, doubt, fear. She remembered how her adoptive mother treated her so harshly, even trying to force an abortion. Did these newly discovered parents genuinely love her, or were they merely another set of people who'd see her as a means to an end? Anne, voice quavering.
I don't know what to say.
Mr. Shen, softly.
There's no need for words right now. We only want you to know we never meant to lose you. If you'll allow us, we'd like the chance to make up for lost time.
Anne's eyes glistened. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand. Mrs. Shen clasped it, tears running freely. For a moment, it was as if the world paused, granting them a fragile, beautiful moment of reunion. Outside, however, trouble stalked closer. Vivian, disheveled and driven by desperation, had also caught wind of this meeting. She had bribed someone inside the restaurant to tip her off, determined to sabotage any reconciliation between Anne and the Shens, and perhaps to make one final plea to Alex. Hiding behind a potted plant in the corridor, she watched as Mr. and Mrs. Shen, along with Anne, Alex, and Eric, finished their meal and prepared to leave. She could sense the relief and tentative joy in the air, something that fed her jealousy like gasoline on a fire. Vivian, hissing to herself,
They think they can just erase me, throw me away now that I'm no longer the real daughter. We'll see about that.
She waited until the group stepped into the lobby. Then, sudden as a lightning strike, she strode out. Her once carefully styled hair was tangled, her designer blouse stained with frantic travel. She approached them with a twisted blend of anger and heartbreak. Vivian, raising her voice in the open lobby,
Is this how it ends, Mr. and Mrs. Shen? You cast me aside just like that? After over 20 years of calling you Mom and Dad?
Mrs. Shen stiffened. Mr. Shen stepped forward with visible regret on his face.
Vivian, we gave you everything, but we can't forgive what you've done to Anne, and the lengths you went to, endangering her life.
Vivian, voice cracking,
I was desperate. All I ever wanted was to remain your daughter, and to be by Alex's side. It was your precious Anne who ruined everything.
Anne swallowed back a surge of fear. She recalled the kidnapping, the dark warehouse, that cloth over her mouth. This was the woman who had almost cost her the baby's lives. Vivian, turning to Alex, eyes pleading,
Alex, I can explain everything. I wanted to protect you from her. She's nothing but a gold digger.
Alex, voice like steel,
Stop. You nearly killed my fiancé and my children. There's no justification. None.
The entire lobby had gone silent, gawking at the emotional confrontation. Vivian's face twisted. Tears glittered in her eyes, but a bitter hatred still burned there.
I won't let you get away with this.
That was when uniformed officers entered. Eric had quietly stepped aside and returned with the authorities. Officer, stepping forward, addressing Vivian,
Miss Shen, you're under arrest on suspicion of kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy to commit harm. Please come with us.
Vivian glanced around, panic setting in as she realized there was no escape. Her gaze fell on Mr. and Mrs. Shen one last time. Vivian, in a trembling whisper,
I was your daughter. I only wanted to stay that way.
Their expressions were somber, tinged with sadness but steeled by the knowledge of what she had done. Mrs. Shen, lowering her head,
We loved you, Vivian, but we can't overlook your crimes.
The officers led her away, leaving behind a stunned quiet. In the days that followed, Vivian's arrest sent shockwaves through Riverside. Many in high society who had once looked down on Anne for her humble beginnings now scrambled to align themselves with her newfound status, the legitimate daughter of the Shen family, the soon-to-be Mrs. Liu. The tabloids printed endless apologies and retractions, and Alex used his power to ensure that Anne's name was cleared of all slander. Anne's biological parents extended an olive branch, inviting her to visit their estate. They were patient, respecting her hesitance, and letting her adjust at her own pace. Gradually, Anne opened up to them, feeling hints of the parental warmth she had craved her entire life. She would never forget the pain her adoptive parents inflicted, but at least she now knew she wasn't alone in the world. Meanwhile, Alex and Mr. and Mrs. Shen discussed the next steps for everyone's future. Before long, a small yet elegant ceremony was planned in the Liu Mansion's blooming garden. Anne stood at the top of a petal-strewn aisle, dressed in a simple yet graceful gown that accommodated her growing belly. Flowers of pink and white adorned the arches, the fragrance mingling with the hush of anticipation. Alex waited at the far end, wearing a tailored suit, heart pounding with a heady mixture of excitement and relief. Eric, quietly to Alex as music starts,
You've waited a long time for this day.
Alex, exhaling slowly.
Yes, I have. Let's hope it marks a better beginning for all of us.
When Anne stepped down the aisle, escorted by Mr. Shen, she caught Alex's eyes and felt a surge of love and gratitude. They had endured so many trials, scorn from the media, Anne's manipulative adoptive parents, and Vivian's dangerous plotting, yet here they were, forging a bond that neither wealth nor scandal could tear apart. At the altar, Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Shen both dabbed at tears, elated to see their children finally free to embrace happiness. Even Eric, ever the jokester, blinked suspiciously. Officiant, clearing his throat. Dearly beloved, we gather here today to unite Alex Liu and Anne Sue in marriage. Anne felt her hands tremble in Alex's as he slipped a ring onto her finger. He leaned in, voice tender.
Anne, from the moment fate brought us together, I've never wanted to let you go. I vow to protect you and our children, with my life if necessary.
Anne, eyes brimming with tears.
Alex, I spent so long believing I was alone. You've shown me what it means to have someone by my side. I promise I will stand with you, forever.
They kissed softly, sealing more than a wedding vow, but a promise of hope and resilience. Applause thundered through the garden, an outpouring of genuine goodwill. In the weeks following the wedding, Anne settled into a peace she had never experienced before. She juggled prenatal appointments and started thinking about her career again, how she still wanted to graduate from medical school, eventually becoming a doctor dedicated to helping those in need. Alex stood steadfastly by her side, balancing his corporate responsibilities with paternal excitement. On a warm summer morning, Anne and Alex took a leisurely stroll through the Liu Estate's gardens. Roses climbed the trellises, and the bright sunshine seemed to affirm all the joys that had once seemed impossible. Anne, with a contented sigh.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming.
Alex, kissing her forehead.
Dreams can come true if you're brave enough to hold on to them.
Over time, Anne reconnected with her biological parents more fully. They offered resources to expand her educational opportunities and quietly supported any philanthropic ventures she took an interest in. Though she never moved in with the Shens, the bond between them grew stronger. Forgiveness and warmth slowly replaced the bitterness of the past. Far from Riverside, Vivian faced a trial that led to a conviction for her crimes. The Shens, initially sympathetic to the child they had once loved, realized she needed to atone for her actions. No amount of adoptive affection could excuse attempted harm. As for Anne's adoptive parents, they faded from the public eye, their schemes failing once the truth had come to light. Rumor had it they'd moved to a rural town under strained finances, lamenting the loss of the golden goose they had tried so hard to exploit. Shortly after, the twins arrived, 2 healthy babies, a boy and a girl, ushering in a new generation of love and endless possibilities. In the hospital room, Anne cradled them as Alex beamed beside her, tears of joy reflecting the bright overhead lights. Mrs. Liu and Mr. and Mrs. Shen hovered nearby, all differences put aside to welcome these tiny members of the family. Anne, brushing her fingertips over the baby's cheeks.
Hello, my sweet ones. I promise I'll give you the warmth and love I never had growing up.
Alex, leaning in to place a gentle kiss on Anne's forehead.
We'll do it together.
And so it was that, after storms of scandal, betrayal, and near tragedy, Anne Sue, now Anne Liu, and Alex found the peace and family they had yearned for. Their story was not the simple fairy tale of wealthy bachelor meets impoverished girl. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of protecting what you love, and to the destiny that can spark between 2 souls, even if the world at first insists they're from different worlds. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way, so make sure you subscribe to our channel. That way, you'll never miss our newest uploads.